どうも、勝手に電力2.0で始めたいと思います。今日1249回目というところで、このクリーンクッキングっていうところで、実際にこの薪だとか燃料みたいなところをまだ燃やしているのは特にアフリカの地域で多いんですけれども、これから実は電化というのが結構クリーンクッキングっていう文脈でも重要になってくる。特にグローバルで見ていくと、まだまだ実は3人に1人がですね、この調理っていうのがクリーンクッキングにできていないので、このあたりっていうのが、実は気候変動、健康にも全てに含めて結構重要な論点になってくるのかなということで、ちょっとお話しさせてもらおうかなとここで IA のところの Recommendation for Achieving Access for All ということで、このDomestic Efforts、国内の努力ということで、Managing Social Change of Cooking, Developing Clean Cooking Policy and Plans, Managing Affordability で International Support とかということで、この辺をちょっと紹介します。Recommendation for Achieving Access for All, Taking Clean Cooking off the back burner. Summary, reaching universal access to clean cooking will depend on strong national leadership and programs reinforced by international financial support. Today, less than 10% of people who lack access to clean cooking live in countries with adequate policies and funding to reach near universal access by 2030. Key enablers include regulatory authority for implementing agencies, public engagement campaigns, and financial backing for customers to manage upfront stove costs and ongoing fuel costs. Without additional support, 50% of households in sub-Saharan Africa could not afford cooking at today's prices. Today, modern cooking stoves typically cost from one-third of low-income household monthly budget for the traditional ICS to around three-quarters for an electric cook stove. Yet, if annualized, switching to modern stoves can pay back up to 4 times the upfront investment within a year for those previously buying firewood and charcoal. Still, ongoing fuel affordability support will be needed for some households using modern fuels. Switching to clean cooking relies on widespread changes to social and cultural norms. Grassroots efforts, often women-led, have proven essential to lasting adoption of cooking solutions. Programs that amplify peer-to-peer advocacy, including training salespeople and safety technicians, can make the difference between lasting adoption or stoves going unused. The push to reach universal access to clean cooking could employ nearly 1.5 million people in sub-Saharan Africa by 2030. The transition, however, impacts the millions of people working in charcoal and firewood trade in Africa today. These jobs could decline substantially by 2030, emphasizing the need for a just people-centered transition, including efforts to formalize these industries and upskill workers. International financial flows have and will play a role in advanced clean cooking, especially in regions without the fiscal latitude to use their own public funds to attract clean cooking investments. Development finance institutions have helped pull in more private capital over the years, and mature enterprises are shifting from project by project financing to model where their fund project using corporate equity and debt. Now, business models are emerging such as pay-go and on-bill financing, which can make a difference. Carbon and climate finance is expected to play a growing role as the number of clean cooking projects funded via carbon markets has increased significantly in recent years. Even as more private capital comes into the market, highly concessional lending will still be needed to support projects in the poorest regions. Around USD 4 billion in concessional finance would be needed annually for access to clean cooking, with around three-quarters of that falling to sub-Saharan Africa. Introduction. A major obstacle to achieving universal access to clean cooking is investment and finance from both public and private sector institutions. Clean cooking is a topic that often struggles to draw attention on the international stage, and therefore money allocated to support development often flows at a fair, remaining far below what is required to hit the SDGs 7 target by 2030. The progress made in China, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, South Africa, and other countries demonstrate models for successful programs. Lessons learned in these countries can be transferred and adopted to spur efforts in other countries. While not all solutions may be suitable and country contexts must be accounted for, some core principles are universally applicable, leveraging grassroots initiatives, empowering women by offering choice and opportunity, while also cultivating a vibrant domestic private sector all lay at the heart of bottom-up success stories. So, too does find the right enduring policy settings to attract sufficient investment from both international and domestic sources, public and private. This chapter explores some of these best practices and highlights the role of the international community to achieve clean cooking for all. Domestic efforts, the most successful case studies led by countries like China, India, and Indonesia were reinforced by high-level political visions, clear targets, and a determined implementation plan, and effective distribution of subsidies and international funds. This section explores the elements needed to deliver successful clean cooking campaigns with a special focus on affordability. Lastly, the section explores the importance of gender and people-centered consideration in the transition to clean cooking solutions. Managing social impacts of the clean cooking transition. Cooking is central to culture and community identity, and efforts to shift to clean cooking must affirm this. This requires adopting strategies that account for local tradition while also addressing barriers to adoption rooted in traditional cooking practices. Examples of successful programs include providing sufficient training for stove use, education on safety, cooking classes, and recipe books that help people adapt to new ways of cooking. In the absence of these training programs and educational resources, there is a high risk that new cook stoves will be installed and go unused as households may prefer to stick to tried and tested methods. Education is particularly important for technologies such as biogas digester, which requires regular maintenance. The African Biogesters Components ABC program in Kenya equipped farmers with the skills to act as peer-to-peer trainers, and of the 21,000 biogesters installed, more than 80% of them are still functional in 2022. Training and education can be amplified by the launch of traditional and social media campaigns to raise awareness of the social benefits of clean cooking, which may not be immediately apparent. Public information campaign can also target youth group to ensure the next generation of citizens are well informed on the danger of traditional forms of cooking. Cultivating strong local champions, as done in India and Kenya, has proven to be particularly effective, as people tend to trust local voices, which are reinforced when the tangible benefits become evident in day-to-day life. Peer-to-peer advocacy has often been more successful than centralized campaign spearheaded by governments. Women often play a major role in driving clean cooking initiatives. One study found that women sell 3 times as many stoves as men. The same study found that women who receive dedicated mentorship and entrepreneurial training were significantly more effective in scaling clean cooking. Hence, the importance of programs like the Clean Cooking Alliances, mentorship program, and women empowerment funds. There are a growing number of clean cooking business with women in leadership roles. In the access for all scenarios, the switch toward clean cooking is expected to reduce the use of firewood and charcoal by 50% globally and 70% in sub-Saharan Africa to 2030. The most precipitous decline are in urban areas where most of the charcoal market is today. This shift must be managed responsibly to avoid widespread loss of livelihood as charcoal and firewood value chain are a major source of informal employment throughout much of sub-Saharan Africa. While there is no certainty around how many workers are supported by the informal charcoal and firewood industry today, some estimates range up 7 million people. The transition to clean cooking could lead to charcoal jobs falling substantially to 2030. Managing the impact of job losses on communities dependent on the charcoal trade will be key to the successful shift to clean cooking. Creating a just transition for these workers requires strategic guidance from policymakers and could include support for reskilling these individuals to access long-term employment opportunities, including the deployment in the clean cooking industry. This can dovetail with larger government efforts to raise the level of unskilled workers across the economy. These programs could prioritize women to help realize the full benefits of time saving from clean cooking and into female participation in the workplace. 女性の進出とかも聞いてくるんですね。The IEA estimates that over 1.5 million people could be employed globally between now and 2030 to support cooking campaigns. The majority of these jobs are in developing and providing cooking stove solutions to households, as well as administrating cooking campaigns. Expanding LPG value chain in Africa is expected to create 350,000 jobs, with the bulk of them in retailing and distribution. As a group most affected by a lack of access to clean cooking, women would have a vital role to play here to ensure that strategies and education properly reflect the needs and concerns of people and communities. If defining cylinder and appliance manufacturing operations abroad onshore, the number of jobs in the clean cooking sector could grow substantially. Operators of terminals, storage, refilling, and delivery infrastructure, including drivers of LPG tank trucks and local installers, must be well trained in safety procedure. Biogas digesters production, installation, and maintenance can also be major boon to employment but require training to ensure performance standards. In parallel, extending electricity access or create job in the access for all scenario. And provider may also play a role in selling bundles that include electric cook solutions. Work training is key to building up successful clean cooking program. Many of these jobs do not require extensive training, defined as less than 4 weeks, including on-the-job training. But cultivating a skilled workforce is necessary for domestic firms to compete in the growing clean cooking market. Development clean cooking policy and plans. When it comes to policies and plans, clean cooking can be considered as an open sector. Also, most countries without universal access to clean cooking have implementing agencies. The development and carrying out of the plans can be hindered by fragmented objectives between ministries and agencies. For instance, some countries may have biomass master plan, charcoal strategy, and electric cooking strategy, each designed by different government bodies. The first step for any clean cooking program is a statement of ambitions, ideally with close ministry support and authority in change of implementation and an implementation plan backed by funding. An increasing number of governments have clean cooking targets and policies, but many still lack adequate resourcing or authority to drive implementation. Many countries have laid out plans to tackle clean cooking, and about 90% of the population without access to their live in countries that have set up implementation agencies to implement clean cooking plans. However, only around 20% of those people live in countries that have also allocated funds and resources to the implementation of those plans. Today, by the IEA's assessment, less than 10% of people without access to clean cooking live in countries with adequate policies and funding to reach near universal access by 2030. See Chapter 2 for more detail or current policy settings. Establishing clear regulatory oversight through agencies can help track the domestic stove market, ensure minimum standard requirements, and provide support only to those that are approved. Providing stable long-term incentive to deploy clean cookstoves and supporting technology is important to create a competitive ecosystem for private sector actors. Allocating predictable long-term funding for these measures, as well as minimizing revision to the program, can help build confidence for market entry, fostering a network of original equipment manufacturers and distributors for LPGs, biogas, electricity, and ICS in rural areas, reducing or scrapping tariffs and duties on imported cookstove components and providing access to cheaper finance for farm willing to invest under government-led programs can also encourage further market participation. Policy efforts should also consider how to cultivate domestic capital market participation in clean cooking enterprises and initiatives. The success of clean cooking efforts in India and Indonesia can be attributed to the existence of local companies and domestic capital markets which provides both loans to customers but also capital for domestic companies that are directly involved in the clean cooking sector. The availability of domestic financing is particularly important for small and medium-sized enterprises and can increase the number of commercial firms that operate in the sector equally. Local capital many provide loans to individual customers to buy clean cookstoves and pilot new models to extend financing. Some markets have considered securing additional financing by extending credit to the most reliable clean cooking customers, and approaching which relies on local counterparts to provide data and access risks. Tackling progress on Korean cooking deployment and involving technology costs and making this publicly available support or a more dynamic and successful private sector. Routine surveys by implementing agencies should include questions on cooking technologies, cooking safety, cook stove sales, and fuel sales to build a year-on-year picture of clean cooking progress. Clean cooking should not be viewed in isolation from other energy, development, and climate objectives. Countries should integrate clean cooking with electricity access efforts and make sure these programs define outcomes for gender equality, health standards, forestry agricultural practices, including metrics to track progress against these outcomes. In order to be successful, these approaches must be tailored to local contexts, as technologies and methods often interact with the cultural roots of the current or region. For instance, the sustainability of technologies in East Africa may differ significantly from those in West African nations due to cooking preference, such as slow cooking versus high heat frying. Cultural norms on cleanliness have made biogas from waste a popular option for a number of consumers. Programs must also consider social perceptions of gender customs, land rights, and wildlife protection, as well as different ethnic communities within the same country. Clean cooking campaigns can adapt best practice and share these experiences to help other countries better plan this effort. Managing affordability. Well-designed policies and programs are needed to overcome the upfront and operation cost barriers facing consumers adopting clean cooking technologies. Incentives and appropriate business model will be required to encourage uptake as many vulnerable households lack the financial means to cover the upfront cost of the cook stove, and most consumers yet to gain access will need ongoing support, at least initially, to afford fuel. Based on current technology cost, improved charcoal cooking stoves represent on average around one-third of monthly income for a low-income household in SSA. For LPG stoves, that share rises to half, three-quarters for electricity stoves, and to around six times the monthly income for biogas stove and digesters. Yet, if the cost of the stove is annualized, switching to improved biomass cook stoves can pay back to four times the upfront investment within a year due to the higher energy efficiency. Where then households are buying firewood and charcoal. The switch to a modern cook stove would pay back over its lifetime in almost all urban contexts. More efficient appliances such as electric pressure cookers have higher upfront costs, but the improved efficiency can bring additional saving in the long term. This suggests that availability of cheap end user credit, including novel approaches like on-bill financing or efficient appliance or pay-go models, could help further scale clean cooking uptake in rural areas. The cost-saving case for switching to modern fuel or more announced. For those who gather solid biomass fuels, the switch to pay fuel is always perceived as an increased cost, especially for households with little access to cash. However, dairy fuel gathering and traditional cooking carries important hidden costs in foregone time and risk exposure. Then, accounting for these opportunities costs, even assuming low-paid work available near rural communities, the effective cost of traditional use of biomass can be higher than other modern energy cooking options. Annualized total cost of cooking and upfront cost as a share of income for a low-income household in Sub-Sahara 2022. The opportunity cost っていうのと、この total annualized cost。で、実際にチャコールとこのコレクティブバイオマスと、このチャコールっていうところと、モダンクッキングっていうので、まあ実際になかなかこう安くなるって、マウスオブインカムの何パーセントを自分たちの給料何パーセントを占めるかっていうところで、まあ、増えてしまうとなかなか取り組みづらいっていうところ、やっぱりバイオマスがなかなかこう強いっていうところになってくる。で、the share of income consumers in emerging market and developing economies spend on cooking remains much higher than elsewhere in the world. In advanced economics, the average customer spend between USD 100 and 250 a year on energy for cooking. On average, less than 0.5% of their income. In emerging and developing countries, this share is roughly double on average. However, average fail to represent the cost burden on the poorest, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. More than half of households yet to gain access in region would spend more than 5% of their income on cooking devices and fuels regardless of the clean cooking option used. This is true even after accounting for incentives allocated to devices and fuels. A share of households yet to gain access in sub-Saharan Africa, where clean cooking is less than 5%。結局、クリーンクッキングはまだ5% of their income by technology っていうことで、実際にインカムの5%未満ってなるところですね。エレクトリシティクッキングっていうのはまだまだこの比率が高い。で LPG、ICS ってことで、なっていくという感じですね。Percentage of household income 自分たちのハウスを improved and advanced cook stoves could provide access to the substantial share of household, but most of them will need financial support. 結局、電化していくっていうのはお金がかかるってことなんですね。As such, ongoing affordability support combined with end user financing scheme may be needed for many of these households. All households switching to modern fuel between now and 2030 would in aggregate spend USD 65 billion annually by 2030 on LPG and electricity in the access for all scenarios. This does not consider the sizable spending on purchase fuel wood, charcoal, and ethanol by urban households, which can be significant, bringing down the cost for cooking to levels consistent with 5% of income for all households gaining clean cooking access would require USD 40 to 55 billion per year. Some of this can be managed through a close subsidization between low income and high income consumers, but targeted direct consumer support would likely be needed, managing affordability of stoves for consumers without placing too much strain on public finances. Finances is a delicate balancing act. India and Indonesia both relied heavily on fiscal incentives for LPG stoves and cylinder. However, sustaining these subsidies over the long term can become a fiscal burden for governments, particularly if they are poorly targeted. Moreover, once subsidies have been put in place, removing them without unwinding progress can become challenging and unpopular. This is why targeted measures to support the most vulnerable households and communities is important. There are many examples where the removal of subsidies provide a catalyst for consumers to revert to traditional use of biomass, such as Senegal in 2010 to 13. Uh, a number of countries have intention to diversify their cooking energy mix, increasingly looking to electricity to reduce LPG import and subsidy burdens. Several countries are currently looking to remove and reduce financial support for LPG. For instance, India implemented a voluntary scheme for wealthier householders to forego LPG subsidies in 2015, then made efforts to remove subsidies during COVID-19 when prices are low. However, the global price spikes compelled India in 2023 to expand the subsidies by 1 year to avoid disruption to the poorest households. In Indonesia, nearly 35% of cooking energy demand comes from LPG, driving the government to implement programs aimed at increasing electric cooking, which is less exposed to price shocks, while electricity subsidies also present differences. Targeting consumers through electric design is easier than with retail LPG. Additionally, electricity tariffs are composed to cover a higher share of fixed costs, leaving them less exposed to fuel prices, especially in regions with higher share of renewables. There may be scope in some cases to move from broad-based fuel-specific subsidies for LPG to more targeted support that reduce fiscal burdens without sacrificing affordability. Yet, tailoring support remains a challenge in regions where administrative systems are under-resourced. Digital payment schemes such as pay as you cook or pay as you go and partial refills business models can provide a useful window into the ability of end users to afford clean cooking solutions. Data from these transactions could be used to offer the most vulnerable consumer an appropriate level of support. Lessons learned from payment schemes in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa could be leveraged to provide a template for other countries across the region. Customer awareness and education for households to ensure they fully understand the opportunity dividend of switching to modern, cleaner stoves is crucially important. Often this transition is only thought of in terms of upfront financial support costs, rather than the economic benefits that it will deliver by freeing up those in the home to work and engage in other activities. International support. International support, particularly financing, will be essential to reach universal access to clean cooking this decade. The success of India, China, and Indonesia's clean cooking progress comes from strong policy commitment and dedicated public funding. In turn, this attracted substantial private and state-backed capital to clean cooking. However, this model is replicable in many countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. High debt burden, constrained fiscal leeway for increasing public spending, and shallow domestic capital markets are all signal the need for international participation to spur an increase in cooling cooking investments. In the access for all scenario, investment in cookstoves, consumer equipment, and infrastructure totals USD 8 billion annually through to 2030. Achieving universal access to clean cooking will depend heavily on the availability of sufficient concessional financing, a form of financing that offers far from generous terms than private investors or commercial capital markets. This type of financing comes in many forms, but typically those are grants that do not need to be paid loans with very favorable rate of interest, or guarantees whereby a third party agrees to cover risk in case repayments cannot be made. Development financing institutions, DFIs, and multilateral development banks, MDBs, are the main providers of concessional capital for clean cooking project today. The best practice is provide enough concessional financing support to start projects that would otherwise struggle to attract investment, appealing to private and commercial actors, pensions and banks, private equity, to then commit additional funds. Concessional finance is essential to attract the private sector to make stoves and equipment available to the poorest households and the most vulnerable communities. In this sense, the project may be considered too risky or fail to demonstrate a clear pathway to financial returns for private investors alone. However, infrastructure projects related to clean cooking could offer a more compelling investment case to the private sector. For instance, infrastructure for LPG delivery, as well as grid reinforcement and expansion, could rely more on private finance over time, with support focused on consumers, which helps ensure that demand will be there to support these investments. The IEA estimated around USD 4 billion of concessional finance would be needed annually for access to clean cooking, with around three quarters flow to sub-Saharan Africa. As companies providing clean cooking solutions developed and matured, the degree of concessional support needed for these projects declines. This evolution can be seen in the source of international financial flows to clean cooking projects tracked over the last decade, where the share of private capital in clean cooking projects have risen by the end of the 2010s. This share grew from less than 10% to around 35% in the most recent years tracked. Further increase would be necessary to reach the level of investment required by the end of this decade. Rising private participation does not lessen the need for constitutional funding for clean cooking from DFI, which must continue to work in region and with households that the private sector would not serve to without their intervention. International financing flows for clean cooking to select countries 2014 by financial instrument too. Clean cooking is shifting from highly concessional financing to more private capital and moving from project by project financing to investing in clean cooking companies. The type of financing instruments used have also changed in recent years. Year on project debt was common, with projected financing individually and under very specific terms based on their risk profile and likely returns. Over time, and with proven track records, clean cooking developers were able to attract investors to take equity stakes in their companies and fund projects using corporate debt. In the early 2010s, projected debt represented over half of all international financing flows to clean cooking and has largely been supplanted by corporate debt and equity. Still, concessional financing can help crowd it in more institutional investors, as is the case in the Spark Africa Fund, which attracted institutional investors by including a first loss tracker provided by Africa Development Bank Group. Access to this variety of financing instruments gives developers the flexibility to scale and explore new approaches. For instance, they can procure a large order of stoves for several projects at a time, which can help bring down the cost per stop. Similar models exist, such as demand aggregation, in which authorities can help clear a larger transaction for numerous small to medium enterprises, bringing down costs but also simplifying financing by having a single large contract with a government entity instead of numerous small deals with different companies. Firms relying on pay-go models have also had successful secure listing revenue streams from their most reliable customers, allowing them to further leveraging their capital to extend to newcomers. Grant funding continues to play an important role for clean cooking in contexts that do not guarantee immediate returns. The need for this highly concessional pot of money, including philanthropy, is essential to reach universal access quickly, as private capital role is quickly likely to remain limited this decade. Novel approaches such as result-based finance can be played a role too. Grants are also useful to set financial and legal frameworks necessary for receiving carbon financing or RBF and can be used to carry out pilot projects, including local R&D and D efforts which can pave the way for future projects that are more attractive to private capital. The role of carbon markets and finance is also increasing and is poised to play an important role in the future, albeit providing small amounts to clean cooking today. International carbon credits have been available for clean cooking projects for the past 2 decades. These credits are purchased by companies and governments in industrialized countries to help them meet their climate targets by financing projects in industrialized countries. These revenue streams can be potential enough to move projects into the realm of bankability, especially as they are frequently backed by the country or company with a stronger credit rating than local entities. Clean cooking stoves projected in rural areas are considered highly additional as projected would not occur without these credits. Additionality is important for companies looking to make sustainability claims with these credits, making them attractive instruments. Clean cooking credit often fetch a higher price than other credit on offer due to the multiple benefits of improving health, gender equality, poverty alleviation, and reducing deforestation. In the last 5 years, international carbon credit from green cooking projects often trade 3 to 6 times higher than the average credit, and the typical fetched price and around USD 10 to 25 per stove. Clean stoves represent a fraction of voluntary carbon markets by voluntary insurance, 5% without about 979 million credits issued up to 2023. Of these, almost 70% were focused on sub-Saharan Africa. In the access for all scenarios, the full mitigation potential for sub-Saharan Africa could be reached below USD 30% ton of CO2, making it one of the cheapest options for a project investment with robust additionality. Several challenges exist in measurement, reporting, the verification MRV to meet requirements for high quality carbon credits, as does the legal system to access these funds. Grant funding can help set up those systems. One challenge is that today international carbon credit market lack depth. Scaling up the use of these revenues in parallel requires bringing more buyers to the market. schemes must balance emissions reduction and accountability for companies' Scope 1 and 2 operations and indirect emissions, while also not prohibiting greater use of international offsets that can be key to rising levels investment in EMDS. Carbon credit issued for cooked stove related project 24-23 carbon credit by project type, 1 billion credits. Cook stove 4%, cook stove carbon credit by region 79 million credit. It is Sub-Sahara is 68%, Asia Pacific 22%. Clean cooking represents 5% of credit issued since 24, despite 1.5 gigaton of potential reduction. 70% of cook stove credits support projects in Sub-Saharan Africa. Rules and market structure have been evolving lately to accounting for these challenges. The Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, setting the new rule for carbon credit mechanism, incorporates corresponding adjustment mechanisms and shall provide an increased focus on the quality and integrity of those credits. Regional initiatives like the Africa Carbon Market Initiative (ACMI) should also help in enabling carbon markets to grow in developing economies with the development of the regulatory environment. New models of financing clean cooking projects continue to emerge that can increasingly pull more private capital into clean cooking. For instance, carbon credits have been used to discount clean fuel costs instead of stoves, as has been the case for bioethanol sales in Kenya. However, this should be not serve as signal for international finance institutions to take the back seat roles, but instead they can help find opportunities for commercial lenders to take their position in mature projects, bring up capital to reallocate to more nascent project. Conclusion summary. The economic, social, and environmental benefits of universal access to clean cooking for those across sub-Saharan Africa and beyond are undeniable. Delivering on this goal means fewer emissions, fewer premature deaths, fewer women and children out of work and education, and fewer ecosystems lost to deforestation and destruction of natural habitats. Crucially, the technical solutions are available, while the policies required to stimulate investment and incentive uptake of these are all the well-known. Impacts to the access for all scenery in emerging markets and developing economies relative to 2022 population with access が増えてますよね。1.7倍。Impact of reaching universal access でいうところでアニュアルインベストメントに対してモダンエナジーディマンドで GHG は減っていくし、premature death も減っていくし、time collecting fuel food 減っていくと。The COVID-19 pandemic and the global energy crisis have seen the world backslide on clean cooking progress, with 100 million households reverting to traditional cooking practice due to issues over affordability and security of supply. It is now incumbent on government development institutions and other key stakeholders to act to address this long-standing yet entirely solvable problem. The most vulnerable customers in both rural and urban areas need support to overcome the upfront cost of investing in these technology, whether it be e-cooking, LPG stoves, or ICS. Some consumer will also need support on fuel costs, which must be managed prudently to ensure that it is sustainable and fiscal discipline maintained. The world is off track on the reach universal access to clean cooking by 2030 under the UN's SDGs 7 goals. Full scale up of international capital and concessional financing can correct this very short term with a relatively modest level of funds required on the annual basis. This also means making the clean cooking sector are more attractive and vibrant investment opportunities through innovative financing solutions and mechanisms that would be investors assurance to inject funds into these critical development projects It is now time to bring all these important elements together to enable clean cooking for all.